Yes, my friends. Will we have an unexpected departure before the draft? The Baltimore Ravens GM is being pressured to make some changes, and the news has caught everyone by surprise. Will John Harbaugh leave us? I'll tell you everything that's happening, but first make sure you've hit the like button if you've been a Baltimore Ravens fan for over 20 years. If possible, answer here in the comments. Should John Harbaugh leave, or should John Harbaugh stay? Your opinion is very important to us. The Ravens are about to make some important decisions that could shape the future of the team, and the biggest talk right now is about head coach John Harbaugh. While the team is reportedly working on an extension for offensive coordinator Todd Monken, there's one big question hanging over the horizon. What about Harbaugh? The Ravens don't like to put their coach in a lame duck situation, coaching in the final year of a contract, and historically they've made a point of extending him before he even gets to that point. So, is an extension inevitable? Or should Baltimore be considering a fresh start? John Harbaugh isn't just any coach. He's been the face of this franchise for over a decade, delivering consistent success, division titles, and playoff appearances. But there's one major criticism that fans keep bringing up: getting over the hump in the postseason. The Ravens have built a team capable of contending for a Super Bowl, yet once they hit the playoffs, something always seems to fall apart. This season was no different. Despite finishing with an impressive 12-5 record after an 0-2 start and helping guide Lamar Jackson to what is expected to be his second MVP award, Baltimore once again fell short of reaching the Super Bowl. Harbaugh himself seems completely unfazed by the uncertainty surrounding his contract. When asked about it recently, he simply said, "I don't worry about that stuff. It'll take care of itself." That kind of confidence only comes from a coach who knows he's not going anywhere. And let's be real, Harbaugh isn't on the hot seat, not even close. The Ravens front office values stability, and they see the success they've had under Harbaugh as a reason to keep him around. But should they? That's the real debate among fans. Some believe Harbaugh's time in Baltimore has run its course. They argue that the Ravens have developed a mental block in big games, and that mentality starts at the top. Others point to examples like Andy Reid, who was successful in Philadelphia but ultimately couldn't win a championship there. It wasn't until he moved to Kansas City that he finally started stacking Super Bowls. Could a fresh start be exactly what both Harbaugh and the Ravens need? This isn't about saying Harbaugh is a bad coach, far from it, but sometimes change can be a good thing for both sides. Look at what happened with the Denver Broncos. John Fox took them to the Super Bowl, but they got blown out. The team moved on from him, brought in Gary Kubiak, and won it all just 2 years later. Could the Ravens be in a similar situation?
Now, let's be real, this scenario is unlikely. The Ravens aren't going to fire Harbaugh, and he's not stepping down. But it does raise an interesting question. Has Baltimore hit a ceiling with Harbaugh as their leader? If they haven't been able to reach the Super Bowl with this roster, what's stopping them? It's also worth considering what the team might look like if Harbaugh did leave. Would they promote from within, making Todd Monken the head coach? That's another theory that's been floating around, especially with the Ravens locking him up long-term. Some believe Monken is being positioned as a potential successor, but Harbaugh still has complete control of this team. The reality is, as long as Harbaugh wants to coach in Baltimore, he will. The Ravens have no reason to push him out. But is that the best move for the franchise? Would Baltimore benefit from a fresh voice leading this team? Let's hear from you. Do you think Harbaugh deserves another extension, or is it time for a change? One of the biggest arguments in favor of keeping John Harbaugh is consistency. The Ravens are always in the mix. They win games. They win their division. They make the playoffs. That's more than a lot of teams can say. And when you look at what Harbaugh has done, especially with Lamar Jackson, it's impressive. Under Harbaugh, Lamar has developed into one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And if the MVP voting goes as expected, he'll have 2 MVPs under 2 different offensive coordinators. That's not easy to do, and it shows that Harbaugh has built an environment where players can succeed. But then there's the other side of the argument, the postseason struggles. Since winning the Super Bowl in the 2012 season, the Ravens have made the playoffs 7 times. They've won a total of 4 playoff games in those years, and they still haven't reached another Super Bowl, despite having teams that, on paper, looked capable of making a deep run. That's why some fans are frustrated. They see teams like the Chiefs, the Eagles, even the 49ers, consistently getting to the big stage, and they wonder why Baltimore can't do the same. This past season was supposed to be different. The Ravens had the number 1 seed, home field advantage, and a dominant defense. Everything was lined up for them to finally break through. But when it mattered most, they came up short against Buffalo. And it wasn't just that they lost, it was how they lost. The offense looked out of sync. The defense, which had been elite all year, couldn't get key stops. And for a lot of fans, it felt like deja vu. That's where the debate really starts to take shape. Is this a roster issue? Is it a mentality issue? Or is it a coaching issue? The Ravens are loaded with talent. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the league, a strong running game, an elite tight end in Mark Andrews when healthy, and a defense that finished near the top of the league in almost every category. So if the talent is there, and they're still falling short, doesn't that point to something deeper? Harbaugh has been the common denominator through all these playoff disappointments. And while his regular season success is undeniable, the NFL is a league that measures greatness by championships. Harbaugh has won, but that was over a decade ago. Since then, the Ravens have been good, but not great. And in a league where the margin for error is razor thin, sometimes a fresh approach is what's needed to get over that final hurdle. Now, to be fair, Harbaugh isn't the only coach who's faced this kind of criticism. For years, Andy Reid had a reputation for falling short in the playoffs. He was always a great regular season coach, but he couldn't win the big one in Philadelphia. It wasn't until he went to Kansas City and got paired with Patrick Mahomes that he finally started stacking rings. The difference is, Harbaugh already has his franchise quarterback. He has the weapons. He has the defense. So what's the missing piece? Some fans think it's time for a change, but the reality is, the Ravens aren't going to make that move. Harbaugh has full control, and as long as he wants to be in Baltimore, he's going to be here. The real question is, what can he do differently? How can this team finally take that next step? One area that needs to be addressed is the offensive line. Lamar Jackson is one of the most elusive quarterbacks in the league, but even he needs protection. The Ravens are likely going to need to bring in reinforcements, whether through free agency or the draft. Ronnie Stanley has battled injuries, and while he's still a solid player, Baltimore needs to prepare for the future. And at the guard position, they need someone who can help stabilize the interior, especially when facing dominant defensive fronts in the playoffs. Defensively, the Ravens are stacked, but they could use another true pass rusher. The front office has done a great job finding talent, but when you look at the teams that consistently win in the playoffs, they have game records on defense. The Ravens have a strong pass rush, but they need that one dominant force who can change a game by himself. And then there's the mentality. The Ravens have built a culture of toughness, but something is missing when they reach the playoffs. The great teams rise to the occasion. The Ravens, for whatever reason, haven't been able to do that in recent years. That has to change. So now, the question goes to you, Ravens fans. Do you think Baltimore is making the right move by sticking with Harbaugh? Or do you think it's time for a new voice, a new approach, and maybe a fresh start? Let's hear your thoughts. If the Ravens are sticking with Harbaugh, then what needs to change? Because if they run it back with the same mentality, the same approach, and the same weaknesses, then history could repeat itself. The AFC isn't getting any easier. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. Joe Burrow will be back next season. Josh Allen is still a problem. And younger quarterbacks like C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence are only getting better. Baltimore can't afford to just be good. They have to be great. At the end of the day, this team has everything it needs to be a championship contender. The question is, will they finally get over the hump, or will they remain stuck in the same cycle? Let us know what you think. Should the Ravens extend Harbaugh, or is it time for a change?